Chapter 20. The Children of the New Forest. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. The Children of the New Forest by Frederick Marryat. Chapter 20. The summer had now advanced, when Oswald one day said to Edward, "Have you bared the news, sir?" "Nothing very particular," replied Edward. "I know that General Cromwell is over in Ireland, and they say very successful, but I have cared little for particulars." "They say a great deal more, sir," replied Oswald. "They say that the King is in Scotland, and that the Scotch have raised an army for him." "Indeed," replied Edward, "that is news indeed. The Intendant has never mentioned it to me." "I dare say not, sir, for he knows your feelings, and would sorry to part with you." "I will certainly speak to him on the subject," said Edward, "at the risk of his displeasure, and join the army I will. If I find what you say is true, I should hold myself a craven to remain here while the King is fighting for his own, and not to be at his side." "Well, sir, I think it is true, for I heard that the Parliament had sent over for General Cromwell to leave Ireland and lead the troops against the Scotch army." "You drive me mad, Oswald. I will go to the Intendant immediately." Edward, much excited by the intelligence, went into the room where he usually sat with the Intendant. The latter, who was at his desk, looked up, and saw how flushed Edward was, and said very quietly, "Edward, you are excited, I presume, from hearing the news which has arrived?" "Yes, sir, I am very much so, and I regret very much that I should be the last to whom such important news is made known." "It is, as you say, important news," replied the Intendant. "But you will sit down. We will talk a little upon the subject." Edward took a chair, and the Intendant said, "I have no doubt that your present feeling is to go to Scotland, and join the army without delay." "Such is my intention. I candidly confess, sir, it is my duty." "Perhaps you may be persuaded to the contrary before we part," replied the Intendant. "The first duty you owe is to your family in their present position. They depend upon you, and a false step on your part would be their ruin. How can you leave them, and leave my employ, without it being known for what purpose you are gone? It is impossible. I must myself make it known, and even then it would be very injurious to me, the very circumstance of my having one of your party in my service. I am suspected by many already, in consequence of the part I have taken against the murder of the late King, and also of the lords who have since suffered. But, Edward, I did not communicate this intelligence to you for many reasons. I knew that it would soon come to your ears, and I thought it better that I should be more prepared to show you that you may do yourself and me no harm, and do no good to the King. I will now show you that I do put confidence in you, and if you will read these letters, they will prove to you that I am correct in what I assert." The Intendant handed 3 letters to Edward, by which it was evident that all the King's friends in England were of opinion that the time was not ripe for the attempt, and that it would be only a sacrifice to stir in the matter, that the Scotch army raised was composed of those who were the greatest enemies to the King, and that the best thing that could happen for the King's interests would be that they were destroyed by Cromwell, that it was impossible for the English adherents of Charles to join them, and that the Scotch did not wish them so to do. "You are no politician, Edward," said the Intendant, smiling, as Edward laid the letters down on the table. "You must admit that, in showing you these letters, I have put the utmost confidence in you." "You have, indeed, sir, and, thanking you for having so done, I need hardly add that your confidence will never be betrayed. That I am sure of, and I trust you will now agree with me and my friends that the best thing is to remain quiet." "Certainly, sir, and in future I will be guided by you. That is all I require of you, and after that promise you shall hear all the news as soon as it arrives. There are thousands who are just as anxious to see the King on the throne again as you are, Edward, and you know that I am one of them. But the hour is not yet come, and we must bide our time. Depend upon it, General Cromwell will scatter that army like chaff. He is on his march now. After what has passed between us this day, Edward, I shall talk unreserved to you on what is going on." "I thank you, sir, and I promise you faithfully, as I said before, not only to be guided by your advice, but to be most secret in all that you may trust me with. I have confidence in you, Edward Armitage. And now we will drop the subject for the present. Patience and Clara want you to walk with them, so good bye for the present." Edward left the Intendant, much pleased with the interview. The Intendant kept his word, and concealed nothing from Edward. All turned out as the Intendant had foretold. The Scotch army was cut to pieces by Cromwell, and the King retreated to the Highlands, and Edward now felt satisfied that he could do no better than be guided by the Intendant in all his future undertakings. We must now pass over some time in a few words. Edward continued at the Intendant's, and gave great satisfaction to Mr. Heatherstone. He passed his time very agreeable, sometimes going out to shoot deer with Oswald, and often supplying venison to his brother and sisters at the cottage. During the autumn, Patience very often went to the cottage, and occasionally Mr. Heatherstone paid them a visit. But after the winter set in, Edward came over by himself, shooting as he went, and when he and Smoker came to the cottage, Billy always had a journey to go for the venison left in the forest. Patience sent Alice many little things for the use of her and Edith, and some very good books for them to read, and Humphrey, during the evenings, read with his sisters, that they might learn what he could teach them. Pablo also learned to read and write. Humphrey and Pablo had worked at the saw pit, and had sawed out a large quantity of boards and timber for building, but the building was put off till the spring. The reader may recollect that Edward had proposed to Humphrey that he should ascertain whether what the robber had stated before his death relative to his having concealed his ill-gotten wealth under the tree which was struck by lightning was true. About 10 days afterward, Humphrey set off on this expedition. He did not take Pablo with him, as, although he had a very good opinion of him, he agreed with Oswald that temptation should not be put in his way. Humphrey considered that it would be the best plan to go at once to Clara's cottage, and from that proceed to find the oak tree mentioned by the robber. When he arrived at the thicket which surrounded the cottage, it occurred to him that he would just go through it and see if it was in the state which they had left it in, for after the Intendant had been there, he had given directions to his men to remain and bury the bodies, and then to lock